Author and essayist Chuck Klosterman, out now with a new book, The Visible Man. Good to have you on the show this morning.
Thanks for having me here.
He's Mr. Grantland, Willie.
Yes,
he is. Mr. Grantland.
What's going on there?
Simmons duped him into coming to work with him.
Why would you let Simmons do that?
He seemed excited, and it seemed lucrative.
What a lie.
I like the transparency.
I've got a website startup. You're going to make lots of money.
Well, it's weird, though, because it's not really a startup. It's from ESPN, so it's sort of like MSNBC starting up, I guess, after NBC.
That's a great site, though, isn't it?
Oh, I hope so.
How rich are you now?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm right. I can afford a suit to wear in the morning.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good start. That's a good start. Now, Willie, you're talking about his college football predictions. What are you talking about?
I don't want to call him out on this. We all write things on the internet we don't mean. Isn't that
Right.
fair to say?
I can't even remember what I wrote about it.
I think you were excited about some teams that have actually shut down their programs midway through the season. Let's talk about the book.
SMU Mustangs. Yeah, let's talk about the book.
So, The Visible Man.
The Visible Man.
The Visible Man.
As always, you've challenged us here. First, I guess, describe who the Visible Man is and why he's us in some way.
Well, I don't know if he is us in any way.
Some of us.
Yes, someone. The book basically is just an attempt to, I would feel weird if somebody else described it this sort of simply, but it's kind of like what it would be like to be the therapist for a psychotic invisible man who would come in and sort of describe his guilt and the problems that arise when you spend your life observing people when they don't realize they're being observed.
So there's a guy who's developed cloaking technology who can make himself invisible and sneak into other people's lives.
That's always the problem when you're trying to have like something like an invisible person. You got to kind of construct some way that he can be invisible. Kind of in the classic Invisible Man stories, it was often these potions. Right. Where I think in like the H.G. Wells novel, it has something to do that it made the refractive index of light or something 1.33, which is like what. But so I kind of had this idea that this man had been working for some, of course, military-related operation where they were trying to create this kind of active camouflage, and then he takes the material and decides to use it for his own purposes.
But I guess the core question is, what you get at in the book is, are we our most pure, truest selves when we're alone, when we think no one is watching?
Well, yeah,
right?
When I had been writing this is I started writing this when I was still working on my previous book, which was nonfiction.
Right.
And there's an element in that book about interviewing and the problems with interviewing and sort of the inherent weakness of trying to get information from people by asking them questions, because a lot of times the interview process sort of changes the meaning and the context of what they say. So I was just sort of thinking, well, what would be a better way than interviewing? If you wanted to understand human nature, what would be one possibility? And I thought, well, one way, even though it would be obviously unethical, would be to observe people when they're not even aware that they are being watched. Would this somehow, are people perhaps only themselves or only totally comfortable when there is no one else around? They're not editing themselves in any way. So I kind of create this character who goes into people's houses when they're alone and tries to sort of understand the nature of being alive. But, of course, that's a flawed process, too. And then as he talks to his therapist, he essentially just interviews himself. So he kind of contradicts his own premise.
It's interesting because Mike Barnacle sneaks into people's homes and observes them as well.
Yeah,
although he's not invisible.
Yeah, no, it's...
exactly.
And
why do I suspect that when you were writing this, that you were you were invisible? I mean, this is something you've always wanted to do. It's just eavesdrop into people's lives.
The problem that I have, because I've done a lot of first-person writing. Most of my writing has been like sort of essays or memoirs, so people assume that's just how I write. In fact, one friend of mine read this book very early on, and I said, well, what did you think of it? And he's like, well, initially I thought you were the therapist, but now I realize you're the invisible man. Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm not really either of them, or I guess I'm both. I'm not, It's just how it works. That just happens to everything I write. Everything I write, people assume is me talking directly at them.
So you say you can barely afford a suit. Now you can, but if we...
No, he's rich.
Yeah.
He's rich now because Bill Simmons...
I'm in the 1%, yes. People are occupying Wall Street against my life.
Socks, and I wonder what's going on.
These socks?
Yeah.
These are NBA socks.
Look at this.
Those are great.
Look at those socks, NBA socks with turquoise...
I would worry about you.
Also, that's kind of a shallow take on my nature. You're looking at my socks and making a decision about what I'm like.
You can learn a lot by looking at things so people don't think you're going to look
you're
at like
making
like
an
Mike
assumption it's a
Barnacle.
bad decision.
Well, because if you say you frame it by going like, well, you're so successful, but here I am looking at your socks. It doesn't seem as though you're suggesting.
It's funny. You remind me of someone who doesn't let me
here's
finish my
our
thoughts.
reference. Okay,
I got MLB socks, but I'm not wearing them today. You get NBA.
Oh, Barnacle,
well,
please.
you know, my socks are locked out.
Okay.
So why did you write this book? Why did you write this book?
Why did I write it? Well, you know,
Why?
Writing is fun.
Yeah.
You know, and I had an idea. And sometimes
Where were you when you came up with the idea?
I was in Leipzig, Germany.
Were you really?
Yeah.
And what were you doing when you came up with this idea?
What was I doing? Well, I was working on this other book for one thing,
Right.
and I had been asked to teach a college course in Leipzig, Germany. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why. And I'm not saying that in some self-deprecating way. Like, no one seems to know.
No, we don't know why either.
I got the email from the guy, and he said they'd tell me when I got there. And then I got there, and they were like, well, didn't the guy tell you? And so no one knows.
Yeah.
So I was by myself in this apartment in Germany. And, of course, it's on the east side of Germany, which means that the second language is Russian. So I kind of overlooked the problem of living in a country where you don't speak the language. But so I was in this apartment when I wasn't teaching, and I was working on this nonfiction book. So I guess I was just sort of, and I also had by chance reread the original Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, so I was maybe obviously planted the seed. But I mean, are you asking a different question? What was
I want to know the creative process. What were you doing when the light bulb went off over your head and you said, you know what, this would be a funny concept to move forward with, a great concept? I know where you were.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if there wasn't like a bolt of lightning, I suppose.
No.
It more has to do with, sometimes you want to talk about ideas, and they're problematic ideas, but you still think they're interesting. And you can't. It's difficult to write about these ideas in a nonfiction setting because those ideas will then be attached to you.
Well, I'd be boring
so what I wanted
as hell
to have,
as well.
Well, it depends how playfully you do it, I guess.
Yeah.
But regardless, I wanted to have a character or multiple characters who could say things that I thought were interesting that weren't directly coming from me.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's a big reason why people like to make up characters.
Very good. Chuck Klosterman, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your autobiographical book,
Definitely.
The Visible Man. No, not at all.
Listen,
No, this
thank
sounds
you very
fascinating.
much.
Well, thanks for having me here.
Thanks
It's
for
always
rolling
fun.
with us.
We're big fans.